Pigs gone wild. Researchers found that Texas has the worst feral hog problem in the entire country.
Feral hogs are wreaking havoc across Georgia, tearing up farmland, spreading disease, and outsmarting hunters.
Now, a new state program is rewarding people who go whole hog in fighting back.
They're not like our native wildlife. They can cause very significant damage to both agriculture, property, homeowners, and to wildlife habitat.
The farmer stands at the edge of his cornfield, rifle in one hand, spotlight in the other, and watches roughly 60 wild boars decide he isn't worth running from. The light catches 40-pound juveniles and 300-pound adults in the same beam, heads lifting, bodies calm, eyes reflecting back at him with a kind of cold arithmetic. They assess the distance, calculate that he is too far away to matter, and go back to feeding. Every fence he has built, every shock, every bullet, every dollar he doesn't have, none of it is enough to make these animals afraid. And the thing that will finally end this is something a single excavator can dig in an afternoon. The enemy nobody could stop. He fires. He kills two. The rest disappear into the tree line without urgency, not fleeing in terror, but withdrawing with the calm deliberateness of animals that know they can afford to wait. They are back in a different section of the same field the following night. The stalks are trampled flat, creating paths through the rows like highways. Ears of corn have been ripped off and scattered across the mud. The soil is churned up from hundreds of hooves moving through the same ground over and over. What should have been a field approaching peak harvest looks like it had been hit by a tornado. Except, tornadoes don't leave tracks, and tornadoes don't come back night after night until everything is gone. He walks the perimeter that morning and tries to add up what it has cost him.
The hog populations are worse, or where we've seen the most damage in our crops from years previous, so that could determine whether or not we plant a grain crop or we plant a cotton crop.
Not just this season. The fencing, the bait, the ammunition, the nights he's lost standing out here with a rifle. His insurance doesn't cover wildlife damage. His bank doesn't care that the animals responsible can run faster than a man and think as clearly as a dog. Every dollar the field was supposed to earn is being eaten in the dark by something he cannot outspend, cannot outgun, and cannot outlast. This is what the war looks like. 6 to 9 million feral hogs tearing through American farmland. Roughly $2.5 billion in damage every year to agriculture, property, and ecosystems. And despite hunting seasons with no bag limits, despite millions spent on trapping programs and professional removal operations, for decades the population has just kept growing. The biology makes the math brutal. A single sow can produce 2 litters per year, with an average of 6 piglets per litter. Those piglets reach sexual maturity in 6 months. Run those numbers on exponential growth, and you start to understand why every effort to slow the problem seemed to make it worse. Kill half the population in a region, and within 2 breeding cycles, you're back where you started. Kill 3/4, and the survivors simply accelerate their reproduction. Government programs spent millions and barely moved the needle. Researchers published paper after paper, explaining why the problem was effectively unsolvable. The hogs kept coming, generation after generation, bigger and smarter and more numerous than the year before. Then something happened that almost nobody in wildlife management predicted. Farmers figured it out themselves, not with expensive technology, not with federal funding, with something that had been sitting there the whole time, waiting for someone to notice. The arms race. Nobody won. When wild boars first became a serious agricultural problem in the 1980s and 1990s, conventional wisdom said stronger barriers would solve it. Farmers invested in heavy-gauge welded wire fencing. The hogs went under it. They rooted beneath the fence lines until they created gaps large enough to walk through. So, farmers added buried wire mesh extending several feet underground, turning fences into foundations. The hogs found the weak points where mesh sections ended.
Or call an exterminator. There's roaches in your house, kill them. There's no way around it. I know it sucks to, no one wants to kill anything.
Where posts weren't quite deep enough, where the soil shifted after heavy rain. So, farmers upgraded to electric fencing, serious high-voltage permanent installations with multiple strands at different heights, designed to deliver shocks strong enough to stop large animals in their tracks. Hogs that touched the fence got shocked, squealed, and ran. Then they came back. They tested the fence again. They learned. Wild boars are roughly as intelligent as dogs, and they don't simply file pain away as a permanent lesson. They keep checking. A shocked hog waits, comes back later, tests the fence again. If the voltage has dropped because of vegetation contact or battery drain, the hog notices immediately. If a strand breaks or a gate is left slightly open, the hog finds it within days, and young pigs learn from adults. When a sow figures out how to bypass a fence, her piglets learn the technique, and within a single season, that fence flaw becomes institutional knowledge inside the local population. Farmers found themselves in a technological arms race they couldn't win. $10,000 to $20,000 per mile for sophisticated multi-layer systems. Solar panels, battery backups, alarm monitoring, voltage checks twice a day. Grass trimmed back from the wire every weekend, and the hogs still got in. The fundamental problem wasn't the quality of the barrier. Every fence, every shock, every deterrent was designed to modify behavior, to make them afraid, to make the cost of entry feel too high. But wild boars are motivated by hunger, with an intensity that exceeds their fear of pain. A shock hurts for a moment. Hunger hurts for hours. The hog that touches the wire and jumps back is the same hog that returns 2 nights later to see if the wire is still live, because the corn on the other side hasn't moved. Farmers weren't losing because their fences weren't strong enough. They were losing because they were trying to negotiate with hunger, and hunger doesn't negotiate. The breakthrough nobody expected. The shift came from a farmer in the Atchafalaya Basin region of Louisiana who stopped thinking about deterrence entirely. He wasn't trying to scare the hogs, he wasn't trying to hurt them. He wanted to make entry physically impossible, and when he started thinking about it that way, he noticed something about wild boar biology that almost nobody had thought to exploit. They cannot jump. Their bodies are built for rooting and pushing, powerful, low to the ground, with strong necks and shoulders designed for digging and forcing through dense vegetation. But their leg structure, body weight distribution, and center of gravity make them poor jumpers. While a white-tailed deer can clear a 5-foot fence without breaking stride, a wild boar struggles to jump anything higher than roughly 2 feet. They have almost no vertical leap, and critically, they can't cross a wide horizontal gap from a standing start either. They simply don't have the explosive rear leg drive to launch their mass forward, so he dug a trench. Not a shallow drainage ditch, a serious excavation. 3 feet wide, 4 feet deep, running around the entire perimeter of his field. The sides cut at steep angles, close to vertical. No ramp, no gentle slope, just a sharp drop into open space. The excavator operator thought he was building a drainage system. The neighbors who drove past assumed a pipeline was going in. Nobody looked at a ditch and saw a wall. The boars came that night. They reached the edge of the trench and stopped. They could not jump across a 3-foot gap from a standing start. They could not climb down the steep sides without losing their footing. They could not root underneath because there was nothing beneath the trench but more trench. He watched from a distance for over an hour. They tested the barrier at multiple points along its length. They walked back and forth. They probed the edges. A large boar lowered its head to the lip of the trench, braced its front legs, and stared down into the gap as if measuring it. Then he lifted his head, turned, and led the group away. The next morning, he walks his fence line in the early light. There are no tracks on his side of the trench, not a single one. His crop is untouched. For the first time in years, whatever had been destroying his fields has simply failed to get in. He stands at the edge of that trench and looks at the absence of tracks the way a man looks at evidence of something he isn't quite ready to believe yet. 3 feet of empty space has done what $15,000 of electric fencing could not. Hold on that image, a man at dawn, staring at dirt that isn't torn up. If a farmer with a rented excavator just outsmarted every wildlife biologist in America, subscribe. Because what happens when he tries to scale this is where the story turns. It worked completely on the first night. The cost comparison was almost embarrassing. Renting an excavator for a day ran a few $100s. Digging a trench around a 20-acre field took 6 to 8 hours of machine time. No electric bill, no vegetation management, no batteries to replace, no alarm systems to monitor, no maintenance cycles. Once dug, the trench was a permanent barrier operating 24 hours a day with zero ongoing intervention. Word spread. Other farmers started digging. The dimensions varied. Most settled on at least 3 feet wide and 3 to 4 feet deep with near vertical sides. But the principle held everywhere it was tried. The farmers who developed this method did something remarkable. They stopped accepting failure and started asking a fundamentally different question. Not how do we make entry painful, but what can they simply not do? That shift in framing from deterrence to physical impossibility is what unlocked the trench. It wasn't a technological breakthrough, it was a conceptual one. Farmers outthought the problem when outspending it had repeatedly failed. And then the second phase of the war began, the psychology of the trap. Protecting one field doesn't solve the problem. When farmers started surrounding crop fields with trenches, the displaced hogs didn't leave the region. They shifted to other food sources. They moved toward barns and livestock pens. They raided orchards and vegetable gardens. They pushed onto neighboring unprotected land and became even more concentrated in areas that still had access. The trench solved entry. It did not remove a single animal from the landscape. Hunting seems like the obvious next step. For a long time, it was the primary response. But decades of hunting pressure produced something unexpected: smarter hogs. Regularly hunted populations become almost entirely nocturnal. They learn to avoid open areas during daylight. They retreat at the sound of vehicles or voices from hundreds of yards away. And when hunters shoot the first few pigs from a group, the remaining animals don't just scatter. They learn the specific behavior that got the others killed, and they stop doing it. The animals left behind after a hunt are statistically the most intelligent, most cautious members of the population. Traditional trapping created the same problem on a smaller scale. Small box traps that catch individual animals or small groups leave survivors who become impossible to catch again. Catch 3 pigs out of 15, and the 12 that remain won't go near that bait site for months. The breakthrough didn't come from a better trap. It came from realizing the entire goal had been wrong. The goal was never to catch some pigs. It was to catch all of them at once. The method is called whole sounder removal, and it works by exploiting the social structure of wild boar groups. Wild boars live in family units called sounders, typically multiple sows, their offspring from several litters, and sometimes a few unrelated individuals. The sounder moves as a unit: feed together, travel together, rest together. Capture the entire group simultaneously and you remove a complete social structure. No survivors means no learned wariness spreading through the population. No survivors means no breeding individuals left behind. The method requires something most farmers staring at a destroyed cornfield find nearly impossible: patience. You have to feed them for free for weeks if necessary. You have to watch the animals destroying your neighbor's property, knowing you could be out there hunting them and instead leave bait out and do nothing. Because the moment you spook one member of the sounder before the trap is set, you've educated the entire group and potentially burned the site for months. It starts with fermented corn or grain, sour mash. The fermentation creates a powerful odor detectable from long distances, and the slightly alcoholic grain is highly attractive to hogs. Farmers spread sour mash at a site and let the animals find it naturally. No trap, no equipment, nothing threatening. For days, sometimes weeks, they provide free food at the same location, letting the entire sounder develop a routine. Trail cameras count every individual in the group and establish a baseline of exactly who shows up. During this conditioning phase, farmers gradually introduce a corral trap, a large enclosure built from livestock panels. But they do not set it. The openings stay open. The hogs walk in, eat, walk back out. Night after night, the structure becomes familiar, non-threatening, part of the routine. Then comes the piece of technology that changed everything. Modern corral traps aren't triggered by mechanical pressure plates that fire when the first animal steps on them, guaranteeing survivors every time. Instead, they're controlled remotely using cellular trail cameras that stream live video to a smartphone. The farmer watches in real time as the sounder enters the trap. He counts them. He verifies that every single member of the group is inside. Only then, when the entire family unit is confirmed present, does he trigger the trap remotely, dropping a heavy gate that closes the entrance behind them. Farmers using this method report capture rates approaching 100% for targeted sounders when the process is done with proper patience. Entire social groups gone in a single night. But even with trenches blocking crop fields and whole sounder trapping systematically removing family groups, farmers in areas with years of heavy hunting pressure faced one more problem. The hogs had gone almost entirely nocturnal. They were essentially invisible during operations. That problem had an answer too, and it came from a technology originally built for war: hunting in the dark. Thermal scopes that cost $10,000 15 years ago can now be purchased for $2,000 to $3,000 with equivalent or better performance. They detect heat signatures, allowing hunters to identify warm-blooded animals in complete darkness with no light source required. Wild boars light up clearly against the cooler nighttime environment. A hunter with a thermal scope can scan a field from hundreds of yards away and see animals that are completely invisible to the naked eye. The calculation flips. Hogs are most dangerous to crops at night in open fields, exactly when they feel safest. Thermal operations turn that sense of safety against them. The hours when hogs are most exposed are now the hours when they're most vulnerable. Nighttime operations typically involve coordinated teams, positioned strategically around travel corridors and feeding areas. They use suppressors to reduce noise, allowing multiple shots before the group scatters and preventing animals in adjacent areas from being alerted by gunfire. A team that has worked the same piece of ground for months learns the sounders by sight. Which group feeds in which corner, which sow, leads which family, which route they take back to cover at sunrise. Shot placement matters more than most people realize. Wild boars have dense hide, thick shoulder muscle, and a layer of cartilaginous plate called a shield running along their sides. A shot that would drop a deer cleanly can fail to penetrate a mature boar's vitals. Teams that understand the anatomy target the head and neck to bring animals down cleanly and quietly, without alarming others feeding nearby. 3 methods, each one solving a different piece of the problem. The trench stops entry. Whole sounder trapping removes established family groups without creating educated survivors. Thermal operations handle the lone animals and transient groups moving between territories. Together, they represent the most effective approach ever developed for wild boar control at the farm level. Even all 3 methods combined have a ceiling, and the ceiling isn't technical, it's geographic. The war behind the war. A farmer can protect his fields with trenches, systematically trap every sounder that moves through his property, and run thermal operations every week. If his neighbor does nothing, none of it matters long term. Wild boars are highly mobile, with home ranges that can exceed 30 square miles in low-density areas. They don't respect property lines. They don't recognize county boundaries. A vacancy created by successful removal on one farm will be filled within months by animals expanding their range from surrounding areas. This is where most individual control efforts ultimately fail. A farmer invests thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours, achieves real short-term success, and 6 months later, the problem is back. Not because his methods stopped working, but because hogs from 5 miles away have simply moved into the newly vacant territory. The trench still holds, the traps are still set, but the land is full of hogs again, and they didn't come from his property. They came from his neighbors, and the neighbor beyond that, and the undeveloped creek bottom 3 miles east where nobody has been trapping at all. The exponential math that makes feral hogs such a serious problem also makes recolonization almost instantaneous. Effective control requires removing at least 70% of the population annually just to prevent further growth. Actually, reducing the population requires exceeding 80 or 90% across a large enough area to prevent rapid reinvasion. No single farmer can do that alone. The only programs that have produced measurable, sustained results are operating at landscape scale. Entire watersheds, ecological regions, or counties working in coordination. Some heavily impacted areas in Texas and other states have formed cooperative programs where landowners pool funding, share trail camera data, and coordinate removal schedules with professional trappers working systematically across territories large enough to actually move the population curve. In these areas, results are measurable. Populations decline year over year. Crop damage drops. The math starts working for the farmers instead of against them. These programs are still the exception, not the rule. Most affected counties have no formal coordination. Most neighboring landowners operate independently, each fighting their own isolated war, and the hogs move freely between these islands of success, refilling removed territories within a single breeding season. The trench works, the trapping works, the thermal operations work, and the hogs still come back if the commitment stops at the property line. That's not even the most unsettling part of the story. The possibility nobody wants to talk about. Something has been happening at the edges of this problem that the people dealing with it most closely have started noticing and talking about quietly, because it sounds almost too alarming to say out loud. The hogs are getting smarter. Not every individual animal, the population as a whole. The animals that survive repeated control efforts, the ones that avoid traps, that melt away before shots are fired, that shift their patterns within hours of detecting human activity. Those are the ones breeding. Every removal operation, however successful, applies selection pressure. The bold animals get caught. The cautious ones survive. And if intelligence and behavioral flexibility have a genetic component, which evidence from domestic pig breeding strongly suggests they do, then we may be inadvertently breeding a population of wild boars significantly harder to manage than the animals we started with. Field reports describe animals that appear to recognize trail cameras and deliberately avoid them. Sounders that alter their routes immediately after any human activity near their territory. Sows that hold their piglets in cover for days when the pattern of vehicle traffic on a nearby road changes. The hogs are adapting faster than most management programs can respond. The same intelligence that made them impossible to fence is now making them harder to trap with each passing generation. Then there's this. In the northern United States and Canada, something new has entered the picture. Feral pigs that escaped from farms or were deliberately released have been interbreeding with Eurasian wild boar, the larger cold-hardy species previously imported for hunting. The hybrid offspring have a name now, super pigs. They combine the size and cold tolerance of European wild boar with the prolific breeding and adaptability of domestic pig genetics. These animals can survive harsh winters that would kill pure domestic origin feral pigs. They grow thicker coats. They build deeper nests. They push through snow cover that would have stopped their ancestors. The boundary of where wild boars can survive in North America was already moving north. These hybrids are accelerating it. Canadian wildlife biologists are now tracking established populations in provinces where feral swine weren't expected to survive at all. The range keeps expanding. The climate ceiling keeps rising. Every winter that fails to kill them off is a winter their descendants are better prepared for. And then there's the other direction. Wild boars are moving into suburban and semi-urban environments, not passing through but establishing actual resident populations. Parks, golf courses, greenbelts, undeveloped lots, and growing cities. Food, water, and cover, with dramatically fewer predators and hunters than rural areas. Homeowners are finding lawns rooted up overnight. Landscapers are being called out to properties that look like tilled fields. Animal control departments in cities that have never handled a wild boar in their history are suddenly fielding calls they don't have protocols for. If wild, boars adapt to suburban environments the way coyotes and white-tailed deer already have. The problem becomes exponentially harder to address, because every method that works on farmland becomes legally and practically impossible in populated areas. You cannot dig trenches around a subdivision. You cannot run thermal night hunts through a city park. The methods that work were developed for agriculture. The hogs may be moving somewhere those methods simply cannot follow. The honest answer. Farmers solved this. On certain fields, on certain properties, in certain well-coordinated counties, the methods work and the solution exists. What doesn't exist yet is the coordination, funding, and political will to implement it at the scale the biology actually demands. Without that coordination, every success is temporary. Every cleared property is a vacancy waiting to be filled. Do you think coordinated landscape-level control can actually work? Or have we already passed the point where it matters? Drop a comment below. The answer is going to shape what American farmland looks like in 20 years. And as for what comes next, there's a county in East Texas that's been quietly running a cooperative program for 5 years, with data nobody outside the program has seen. And it's about to go public. That's the next video. You'll want to be here. It's 3 a.m. in a suburb outside Houston. A greenbelt runs between two developments. Oak trees, a creek, a jogging path still wet from the sprinklers. The streetlights don't reach this far. Something moves through the undergrowth, then another, then 6 more, low and quiet, pushing through the dark in single file, noses down, following a scent trail that ends at an overturned trash can behind a house where a family is sleeping. They feed without hurry. They leave no footprints on the concrete. By dawn, they're gone, back into the greenbelt, back into cover, waiting for the next night. The The sprinklers come on again at 6. A jogger passes the greenbelt at 6:30 and doesn't look twice at the faint path pressed into the grass where 8 animals walked through in the dark. And somewhere in Saskatchewan, a biologist kneels in fresh snow 100 miles further north than last year's survey and photographs a set of cloven tracks that shouldn't be there.